2 years passed since Red and Blue first released, and the next generation of Pokemon had arrived, Gold and Silver. At the height of Pokemania in the late 90s, many a Pokemon fan had been eagerly awaiting the next entry in the series. Today, we're looking to cover the definitive version of the second generation, Pokemon Crystal. We'll look at the new additions, the changes, and how the game as a whole holds up as we dig deep into the first major sequel to a worldwide phenomenon. The first big additions of this generation are showcased right when you hit New Game. You're given the option to pick the gender of your player character for the first time, a cosmetic choice but a much appreciated one for obvious reasons. You're also asked what time it is, a new mechanic following the real-world clock and day of the week that affects how the overworld looks, what wild Pokemon can be found, how certain Pokemon evolve, and in conjunction with the day of the week when certain events take place. It's a big step forward mechanically and aesthetically, and one that carries over to all core games going forward. After the intro sequence, you're dropped into a brand new region, this one being Johto. Every core game in the series has this in common, along with the introduction of new Pokemon and new moves. There's 100 new Pokemon this time around, and we'll get into the specifics as we go along. Heading downstairs and talking to Mom, we obtain the Pokegear, which acts as a cell phone and lets us call and be called by various characters you'll meet throughout the game. Whether we like it or not, Mom explains how it works. This doesn't happen often in this game, but be ready. Oh, be ready. New Barktown is like Pallet Town in that there's little to do besides go to Elm's lab. When we go inside, Professor Elm will ask a favor of us, requesting that we go visit his friend Mr. Pokemon. And after our adamant refusal to play the game fails, we're given our starter Pokemon, a choice between Cyndaquil, Totodile, and Chikorita. Cyndaquil and Totodile are obvious fan favorites, with poor Chikorita not getting nearly as much love. I'm no exception to this though, since I'll be going with Cyndaquil, one of the best fire types in the game. With our new Pokemon on hand, I should bring attention to a few things. The first being the huge visual jump between Generation 1 and 2. The difference between Yellow and Crystal isn't as severe, but Gen 2 is still noticeably better looking in every regard. The sprite quality is better, the games are in full color, and the interface is significantly improved. You can cycle between screens on a Pokemon summary page and see the description and power of any move your Pokemon knows. You'll also see that the special stat has been split into special attack and special defense. This is a huge improvement since it means that old Pokemon who were incredibly strong as a result are toned down significantly, and some Pokemon can have a bad special attack while still maintaining a good special defense. There's a few other quirks that have been rectified this time around. The type chart has been completely fixed to match what it will be like going forward, type effectiveness is displayed correctly in battle, critical hits have a set chance of occurring, level skipping no longer means that you'll lose the opportunity to learn moves, and Wrap was changed to allow you to fight back. There are a few other battle system changes, but we'll get to those as we come to them. Leaving town, we see that the area you're in is clearly displayed at the bottom of the screen. A very welcome change, especially since most people don't keep track of which route is which, and pulling up the map to find out each time is an unnecessary pain. Getting into a wild battle, we see two important changes right away. The first is that both Pokemon on the field have a gender. This ultimately doesn't affect much in battle beyond a single move, but it has gameplay implications we'll get to later on. The second is that your Pokemon now have a dedicated EXP bar, making it easier to tell when you're close to leveling up. To the north is Route 46, but there's no way up the ledge, so we must continue on to Cherry Grove City. An old man stands here in the front, and you're free to skip his tutorial if you don't need it. If you play along though, he'll give you the map card for your Pokegear, letting you see the map wherever you are without having to use a dedicated item slot for it. Mr. Pokemon's house is further north, and around this time your starter will likely have eaten the berry they were holding, introducing two new mechanics: berries and held items. Berries are simple status restoring items that heal small amounts of damage or cure status ailments. In this game, they're a daily drop from small trees around the region, and are useful in that they're the only condition restoring items Pokemon can use on their own. If given a potion, for instance, a Pokemon can't use it by itself in battle. Pokemon can hold other items too, but with a few exceptions, held items are relatively simple, usually having effects that boost the power of moves of a certain type. Back on track, there's a battle going on to the left that blocks the path, so we're forced to take the right path, which brings us to Mr. Pokemon's house, who gives us a mystery egg to bring back to Professor Elm. Coincidentally, Professor Oak is visiting and decides to give us a Pokedex, and like last time, it's a completely optional side quest. Right as we leave, Professor Elm calls us, asking us to return since something has gone terribly wrong. On the way back, we encounter this mysterious, named trainer who serves as our rival this time around. Unlike the first rival battle in Generation 1, you're very likely to win this one since you probably level at least once or twice on the way to and from Mr. Pokemon's house. After defeating him, he reiterates his weird name, and we head back to Elm's lab, where a police officer is questioning him about the stolen starter. This is where you're given the option to name your rival. Smarter people would do that in this situation, but I was not a bright kid. He told me his name was 3 question marks, the police officer asked me what his name was, so I did what the police officer said and told him. I'm sure I'm not the only one who did this, but his name is actually Silver. Questioning over, Professor Elm encourages us to take on the Pokemon Gym Challenge and sends us off to Violet City. But not before his aide gives us 5 Pokeballs to start our journey. This is a good time to mention that the bag was changed for the better as well. Storage space is still limited, but this time you have multiple pockets for different items and won't have to worry about not having room for HMs and key items in particular. Though Professor Elm encouraged us to go see our mother, we're going to ignore that advice and make a beeline for Violet City. This guy stops us and asks if we need to be taught how to catch a Pokemon, and you can actually say no and he'll relent. Speaking of catching Pokemon, another helpful feature is the caught icon that now appears next to a wild Pokemon if you already have that species registered in your Pokedex, making completion much easier. Retracing our steps, we come to battle our first real trainer battle with youngster Joey, who gives us his number after wiping the floor with him. Not every trainer will ask for your number after a battle, but the ones who do will occasionally call you. Sometimes to tell you about something going on nearby, sometimes to ask for a rematch, and sometimes just to tell you about their day. Speaking of calls, Mom calls and tells you she wishes you would have told her you were leaving and asks if you want her to store your money. This essentially functions as a bank and is incredibly useful since you still have a fixed amount of money you can carry, and occasionally she'll buy things for you if you have her store your money. Heading north a bit more past some cut trees that serve as shortcuts for later, we find a cave called Dark Cave. They weren't lying. It's dark in here. You can stumble around for a bit and find a potion, but you're not likely to get far without Flash, so it's time to head west and reach Violet City. Here we'll find the Trainer School, a recurring stable in the first major city of each game from here on out that teaches the basics of the game, since every Pokemon game is bound to be someone's first Pokemon game. There's also a small alcove with a cuttable tree we'll have to come back to in the Sprout Tower, the game's first optional dungeon. Calling it a dungeon is a bit of a stretch. It's essentially a straight line that leads you through a gauntlet of trainers who all use Bellsprout, leading up to another encounter with Silver, who is shown to have a cold style of battling, and a fight with the top sage in the tower, who gives you the HM for Flash for winning. Getting through is a breeze with Cyndaquil and easy with Totodile, but difficult with Chikorita. Along with the type of the next 2 gyms, this is part of why Chikorita is hard to recommend, especially to a new player. It's a good thing, then, that one of Crystal's greatest strengths is its Pokemon variety. Very early on, you can catch many different types of Pokemon, including a Fire type, a Ghost type, Rock types, and a Ground type. Only the Rock types will help you in the gym, though, since the first gym this time around is Flying. Its layout forces you to battle 2 Bird Keepers before reaching Falconer himself, likely because the Pokemon they use aren't that strong, although you'll find that Gust and other moves like in Generation 1 were fixed to be the right type. Falconer himself isn't much harder, though Mudslap will likely give trouble to those who think having a Rock type will lead to an easy win. Soon enough, you'll earn the Zephyr Badge, allowing you to use Flash outside of battle, letting us explore Dark Cave and opening up the way forward. He also gives you the TM for Mudslap. Most of the TM lineup in this game has been changed, mostly for the better. Some TMs, like Thunder and Blizzard, haven't changed at all throughout the series, but for the most part expect a whole new TM list with some returning entries as we go through. Right after exiting the gym, Professor Elm calls us to ask that we pick up the mystery egg from his aide in the Pokemon Center. Once we pick up the egg, we're on our way to the next destination. If you want, you can go check out Dark Cave now that you can use Flash, but there's a rock in the way preventing you from going further in. Before we progress, we can take a detour to the ruins of Alph, a very puzzle-based area with a few nice rewards for getting further in. It requires multiple visits with different tools, but if you solve the puzzles the game throws your way, you're given a few items for it and learn more about the unknown, the Pokemon that live here. The entire existence of these Pokemon is a gimmick. They look like letters, they only learn one move, Hidden Power, and that's about it. They're truly abysmal as Pokemon and exist more to fill in the world. Woe is the person who decides this is the Pokemon to add to their team. Back on track, the next route is fairly simple, branching slightly here and there until you reach Union Cave, the first mandatory dungeon. And unlike Mount Moon, there's not a lot to this one. There's a few trainer battles here, and sick of being confused by Zubat, huh? I've got bad news for you, buddy. This seems like a good time to point out something I couldn't fit into the last video. In Generation 1, 2, and 3, whether a move is physical or special is based on the move's type. Fire, water, grass, electric, psychic, ice, dragon, and the new dark type work off your special attack stat, while the remaining types work off your attack stat. This is a problem when move types are mismatched with the Pokemon's strength, and although it wasn't as noticeable in Generation 1 because of the special stat being combined, it's much more noticeable here, with my Zubat doing less damage with Bite because its special attack stat is lower than its attack, despite the fact that logically, biting is a physical attack. Alas, there's not much I can do about that, so we'll head out of Union Cave and into Azalea Town, where the Slowpoke well is being guarded by a Team Rocket grunt. A grunt also blocks the gym, and the way forward is blocked by a cuttable tree, so we have little choice but to wander into Kurt's house. Kurt decides this is the exact moment to take a stand and rushes off to confront the grunt in front of the well, knocking him into the well but taking a fall himself in the process. We learn from a few of the grunts in here that Team Rocket is planning a comeback after their defeat 3 years ago, but their Pokemon choice is the same as ever, making them fairly simple to deal with. With Team Rocket ousted and the Slowpoke saved, Kurt gives you a custom Pokeball. If you bring him various types of apricorns you can find in berry trees around the region, he'll make you specialty balls that have special properties like being able to catch water types easier, being able to catch heavy Pokemon easier, and so on. It's time to fight the next gym, but not until this egg hatches apparently. Yours may hatch a bit sooner or a bit later, but around this time it'll finally hatch into a Pokemon. The baby Pokemon Togepi to be exact. While Togepi and its evolved form Togetic aren't exactly great, they demonstrate an element of the game's new breeding system. You can leave 2 Pokemon at the daycare now, and if they're compatible, they'll eventually lay an egg, which hatches into the first stage of the female Pokemon species. Breeding is a staple of the series from this point onward, allowing for Pokemon with moves they otherwise could never learn, and, although tougher in this entry, potentially allowing for genetically perfect Pokemon with the highest possible stats. That's right kids, you too can learn about eugenics in your endless quest for the perfect specimen. Joking aside, it's time to head to the next gym. This gym specializes in bug types, generally the weaker ones you find at the start of the game like the Weedle and Caterpie lines. The trainers in here are mostly pushovers, but the gym leader, Bugsy, can be a pain to deal with. His first 2 are the easily dispatched Cocoon Pokemon, but his ace is a Scyther, a Pokemon with much better stats than anything you've faced up to this point. His signature move, Fury Cutter, gets stronger every time it's used, and has the potential to be the strongest move in the game if it goes on long enough. If you don't resist his attacks and fire back with strong moves quickly, Scyther will cut you to bits in short order. This is another reason why Chikorita is a difficult Pokemon to start with. You can catch a Growlithe and flying types to make the gym easier, but if you're unprepared, Bugsy is a pretty tough fight. Soon though, you'll nab the Hive Badge, the TM for Fury Cutter, and the ability to use Cut. Since there's a cuttable tree ahead, we'll probably be getting that very soon, but not before another fight with Silver. This is one of the most difficult rival battles in the series. Silver has a Ghastly, a Zubat, and his starter, evolved and packing a move super effective against yours. Ghastly has Hypnosis to put you to sleep and wear you down, Zubat is just a general pain, and his starter is his most formidable option. If you've been relying on 1 or 2 Pokemon up to this point, the game is prepared to punish you for it. After beating him, he talks about how much he hates Team Rocket because they're weak. Well, at least we have something in common. Heading into Ilex Forest, a boy worries about his master's Farfetch'd that ran away. This part is usually a pain if it's your first time through. Farfetch'd runs in the opposite direction of which you talk to it. If you circle around though, it's as simple as talking to it twice and it's reunited with its master and apprentice. The charcoal guy gives you the HM for Cutter's thanks, which opens the way forward and lets us grab some goodies if we backtrack a bit. One of the best subtle changes is that you can use HMs by interacting with overworld items. Surf, cut, strength, you name it. If you want to use it, you don't have to go into the menu anymore. Convenient. Going further into Ilex Forest, we can deviate from the path a bit to find this guy, who gives us the TM for Headbutt, a move that lets you headbutt small trees to find Pokemon. There's a few Pokemon that can only be found via Headbutt, like Aipom and Heracross. The daycare mentioned earlier is on the way to the next city, and if you're playing Crystal, you can stop in for a special egg that will randomly hatch into a baby Pokemon that can evolve into a Kanto Pokemon. Goldenrod City is ahead, and it's the largest place in the game. It's analogous to Celadon City in Red and Blue. It hosts the region's shopping mall and game quarter along with a lot of other attractions. There's an underground mall, which changes vendors daily, a name raider, a bike shop, where you can get a bike for free in exchange for advertising for them, the series' first move tutor, who teaches attacks that are usually very good that you can't find in TMs, the radio tower, where you can answer a simple quiz for a free radio card for your Pokegear and check the lottery to see if you can win a prize, the magnet train, which isn't operational yet, and the next gym. There's also the friendship checker. Friendship is a new mechanic technically introduced in Yellow that has an effect on certain things. Certain Pokemon evolve through happiness, and the moves Return and Frustration use your Pokemon's friendship value to determine how much damage they'll deal. As such, it's primarily an aesthetic thing, but it's nice to see them try and implement it into the core gameplay. It's also very difficult to get your Pokemon to dislike you, since so many things from walking to leveling to learning a new move all boost friendship, while the only things that lower friendship are using bitter healing items and having them faint. On another note, the bike we got? Another new convenience is that we can now register an item to select for instant use, further reducing unnecessary menuing. The next gym specializes in normal types, and most of the trainers inside use Pokemon with moderately high HP. The gym looks like a mess of flower beds until you realize it's supposed to be shaped like a Clefairy. A cute touch. The trainers shouldn't give you much trouble, but what probably will give you trouble is the gym leader, Whitney. Her Clefairy can use Metronome. It can pull from almost every move in the game, and if you're particularly unlucky, you could be hit with a one-hit KO move or a powerful move you just happen to be weak to. When you get past that, you're on to Whitney's Miltank, the bane of many a person's childhood. Like Bugsy and Scyther, Miltank is a step above most of the Pokemon you fought thus far, hitting hard with Stomp and Rollout, a rock-type move that, like Fury Cutter, gets stronger as it continues. Unlike Fury Cutter, it starts out strong and gets more powerful as it's used, but only lasts a few turns. Those few turns may be all she needs though. It's very possible for unresisted hits to take your Pokemon down in short order. Eventually though, you'll find a way to overcome and you'll get the Plane Badge, which lets you use strength outside of battle and allows us to progress further. Going north, we can talk to this gatekeeper, who gives us Kenya and asks us to deliver a message to his friend, who we saw just before Violet City. This introduces Mail, a very little used concept that lets you write any message you want and attach it to a Pokemon to trade with friends. It's a cute touch, but ultimately sort of pointless since to trade with friends in this generation you have to be right next to them anyway. It's so kind of this guard to trust us with his precious Pokemon and hoping it gets back to him. After that, we travel along a short route with side areas visible on the left and right and arrive in the national park. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, they hold the bug catching contest. This is similar to the Safari Zone from Red and Blue, but follows a slightly different formula. You can only take in the lead Pokemon in your party, and have no access to items besides the 20 provided park balls, and are tasked with catching one Pokemon to be judged. Battles here are even more of a careful tug-of-war than they typically are. Since you have no way to restore your health unless you happen to have a recovery move, you have to carefully monitor the health of both Pokemon to ensure you don't get knocked out of the contest early. You can go for common Pokemon like Caterpie, but the fully evolved Pokemon that appear like Butterfree, Scyther, and Pinsir are more likely to get you a higher score. Even with one though, random chance might screw you out of first place. The reward for which being a Sunstone, a new evolutionary stone. Speaking of those, they're surprisingly difficult to get in Generation 2. No store in the game sells any of them anymore. Unless you have Crystal, there's only one of each, barring the Sun and Moonstones. With that diversion over, we encounter a wiggly tree at the fork in the road. This girl talks about how the squirt bottle agitates it and makes us backtrack. Alright. After getting the squirt bottle, we return to the tree to discover that it's Sudowoodo, a rock type pretending to be a tree. I really like Sudowoodo. Even though its stats aren't great, it's very memorable for its unique roadblock gimmick. Heading north, we find more apricorn trees, fight twins with the cruelest parents in the world, and enter Ecruteak City, where in the Pokemon Center we meet Bill, who tells us about the Time Capsule, a feature that allows trading between Generation 1 and Generation 2 games. This is the only way to get certain Pokemon such as the Kanto starters, legendary birds, Mewtwo, and the fossil Pokemon. It's a shame they weren't included in this game, and completing your Pokédex means you'll need at least one Generation 1 game, but at least it's possible to breed more starters and fossil Pokemon this time around. If you decide to visit Bill back in Goldenrod, he'll give you an Eevee, which is just as great as ever. Like always, you can evolve it into Flareon, Vaporeon, and Jolteon, but like I said, the elemental stones are hard to come by. You're more likely to evolve it into Espeon or Umbreon. There's a few old Pokemon like Eevee and Golbat who get new evolutions this generation. Typically Pokemon that were decent, but started to get outclassed with the special stat being split. Umbreon is one of the rare examples of the new Dark type. Dark, along with Steel, was introduced to balance out the Fighting, Psychic, and Bug types. Dark is weak to Fighting and Bug, but completely immune to Psychic. The Steel type is also weak to Fighting, but resists Psychic. As a result, the Psychic type is much less broken than before, and type matchups are much more interesting with the new types involved. If we go back towards Violet City and the Fork, this guy will give you the TM for Rock Smash. This will be useful going forward, but right now it lets us go back to Dark Cave and explore a bit more for a few extra goodies and a few optional trainer battles. While we're here, we can return to Elm with Togepi and get rewarded for that too. Where were we? Right, Ecruteak. The game really starts to open up at this point, but before we can really move on, we better tackle this city. Ecruteak has a few places of interest. There's the gym, which we get kicked out of because Morty is absent. There's the dance theater, where we battle 5 Kimono girls, each one using one of the evolutions in order to get the HM for Surf. There's the Tin Tower, but we can't explore here for quite some time. The only place left is the Burned Tower, where we meet Ucine, who we'll be seeing throughout the story. There's not much to the Burned Tower, considering it's burned down and all, but Silver is here and wants another fight. This time around the fight should be much simpler since you have more options at your disposal and his levels are somewhat low compared to what you're likely to be at. After wiping the floor with him, you fall through said floor and discover the legendary beasts, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. Entei and Raikou run off, but Suicune lingers for a moment before it runs off. This delights Ucine, who goes off on Suicune's trail, so wherever we find him, we'll probably find Suicune close by. Now that we've done everything we can here, we can finally challenge the gym. The puzzle here relates to the floor. Every tile is black, and you'll fall through if you walk on the wrong one. The way forward makes you battle every trainer in the gym and walk around in a zigzag pattern before getting to Morty, another gym leader who's likely to be a challenge. His Ghastly and Honders aren't much of a threat, but his Gengar is on another level. It's fast to begin with, and uses Hypnosis and Dream Eater, a nasty combo that heals itself in the process. If you're not faster than it, and are particularly unlucky, you could get wiped very quickly. Victory will net us the Fog Badge, which lets us use Surf and opens up the region to us a lot more. Getting Surf lets us get a few goodies hidden around the region we couldn't access before and lets us access almost all of Union Cave, which is hiding extra goodies itself, including a bunch of tough trainers and, on Fridays, the opportunity to catch a Lapras. There's 2 additional cave exits as well, but one of them requires strength, so we'll wait until then to go through them. From Ecruteak, we can travel either west or east to move on. There's more to do in the west though, so we'll head there first. On the way to the next town is Moo Moo Farm, a dairy farm with a bunch of Miltank roaming the field, but apparently the owners are going to go bankrupt because one of them is sick, so they can't get any milk. I don't get it, but feeding a ton of berries nurses it back to health, and in return we get TM13, it's Snore. That's considerably less exciting, but at least it's something. You also get the opportunity to purchase Moo Moo Milk, a fantastic healing item, but it's not really worth the effort. You have to feed it 7 regular berries, and even if you've picked one from every tree you've seen so far, you won't have enough to heal it, forcing you to backtrack. And the farmer will only sell you Moo Moo Milk if you don't already have any in your bag. One at a time, in a game with limited bag space. After dealing with that, we arrive at Olivine City, where Silver emerges from the gym, telling us that the leader is at the lighthouse, caring for a sick Pokemon, and shows us even more of his charming personality. Olivine doesn't have a whole lot else to offer besides the dock, which we can't do anything at yet, and this guy he gives us the HM for strength. The lighthouse is the next mandatory dungeon, and it's another trainer gauntlet like Sprout Tower, with a few items to find throughout. At the top we meet Jasmine, who is taking care of the lighthouse's light source, Amphi. She tells us that Amphi is sick, and that in Cianwood City across the sea there's a medicine shop that could heal it. With a new goal in hand, we head west towards the sea. Right before the ocean, there's a gate that leads to the Battle Tower. This is primarily a post-game facility where you battle 7 trainers in a row with stipulations that follow traditional PvP battle rules. The Pokemon inside are no joke. It's difficult to win 7 in a row unless you have a team specifically crafted to handle anything, which is better left to the post-game. A ways into the ocean, you'll see the Whirl Islands. Each entrance is blocked by a whirlpool, so we're not going to be able to get in here for now. But we'll need a special item to make the most of it anyway, so mark that down for later. When we reach Cianwood, we'll find that it's a pretty small town. To the north we encounter Suicune again and battle Ucine, who's kind of a pushover. We get the secret potion from the medicine guy and find a man who had a rare Pokemon stolen by Silver, and asks us to protect his last one. It's a Shuckle, a pretty rare Pokemon that has the best defenses in the entire series, but the rest of its stats are pitiful. If you're still looking for a unique party member, it might be worth using Shuckle since it has the traded experience boost. Not for the upcoming gym though, which is a fighting type gym with a very simple strength puzzle. At this point, it's very likely you have a flying or psychic type that can handle this gym with relative ease, the first easy gym in quite a while. Winning nets you the Storm Badge and the ability to use Fly, which the lady outside the gym gives us the HM for after winning. Medicine in hand, we return to Jasmine to give her the medicine. Amphi recovers and Jasmine returns to her gym. No puzzles, no trainers, just Jasmine. And you might be in for a rude awakening if you think she'll be as simple to beat as Chuck. She packs Steel types, which resist a wide spectrum of attacks, and her Steelix hits incredibly hard. Without a good Fire, Ground, or Steel type, you might be in for a rough time. If you aren't ready, you can save beating her for later, but defeating her nets you the Mineral Badge, which is necessary to progress. Now that we have strength, we can go back to that part of Union Cave and finish more puzzles in the ruins of Alph. 2 of them require things we can't get yet, but we can finish all of the tile puzzles and every letter of Unknown will become available, if that matters to you. I mean, there's the Unknown Dex and all, but who in their right mind would— I did it. You get nothing. Please. Please don't waste your time on this. Well, let's continue east of Ecruteak, where we can either take the easy surfing route and encounter Suicune along the way, or go through Mount Mortar. We can't get to the deepest part of the cave until we can use Waterfall, but there's still some useful items in here. When we get to Mahogany Town, there's a guy blocking the other way out insisting that we buy a Rage Candy Bar, and a guy in front of the gym insisting that we visit the Lake of Rage. Sounds like Team Rocket stuff, and sure enough, the guards at the rest house up ahead are Team Rocket members who force you to pay up to get through. Fun fact, if you have no money on you, they just let you through. Isn't that nice? If we take a small detour, there's a small maze with a lot of items at various dead ends and a lone house with a man who gives us the TM for Hidden Power. This move is unique in that its power and type are determined by your Pokemon's DVs, hidden stats that are unchangeable and function more or less like a Pokemon's genetics. This is another part of why Unknown is terrible, but Hidden Power can possibly add some much needed type coverage to a Pokemon's moveset if its DVs are right. On the lake proper, you'll see a Gyarados in the middle. This is a red Gyarados, the first example of shiny Pokemon. Named after the shine animation displayed when they enter battle, shinies are exceptionally rare color variants, having only a 1 in 8,192 chance of being found in the wild, with this being the exception. Shininess is determined by having a very specific set of DVs. Fun fact, no Pokemon in Generation 1 can have the necessary DVs to be shiny, with the exception of Gift Pokemon and Legendary Pokemon. So if you were ever wondering if you accidentally knocked out a shiny in Gen 1, you most likely didn't. Once we catch or defeat Gyarados, we meet a familiar character on the shore. It's the Elite Four's Lance from the first game, and he's here investigating the radio signal forcing evolution and agitating the Pokemon in the Lake of Rage. He tells us to meet with him in the shop in Mahogany, and when we get there he assaults one of the people inside and reveals a staircase to the next Rocket hideout. Take a few steps in and you'll trigger the alarm on the statue, causing true grunts to appear to battle you. This will happen for every statue in the base unless you turn the switch off, making the first part of the base an endurance test. The second part of the base requires you to battle Team Rocket members to learn the password to get into the executive's room. When it's in reach, Silver appears again and complains about how he got whooped by Lance and lectured about treating his Pokemon better. He really came here just to tell us that? The executive inside has no intention of letting us get any further and hastily retreats once defeated, but his Murkrow is more than happy to give us the password to let us shut down the generator. With Team Rocket's plans put on hold, Lance gives us the HM for Whirlpool and we can finally challenge the gym, and we encounter the first ice tile puzzle in the game. Step on one and you're sent sliding until something stops you, and you have to discover the correct path to move forward. I hate these things, no matter how simple they actually are, but unfortunately it's just going to get worse for me very soon. Pryce is surprisingly easy. Even without a fire type, you'll probably have something strong enough to brute force your way through his team. Beat him and we get the Glacier Badge and the ability to use Whirlpool. When we step out of the gym, Professor Elm calls and says there's something about Team Rocket on the radio. Sure enough, it looks like they've taken over the radio tower in an attempt to find Giovanni. We could move forward, but it's probably a better idea to wreck Team Rocket's plans before then. Sure enough, rockets are everywhere in Goldenrod and have taken over the radio tower. The grunts are all easy pickings on the way up to the director, who turns out to be an executive in disguise. He's got a party full of coughing and wheezing, and he isn't afraid to use self-destruct. If you're not careful or just plain unlucky, it's definitely possible to wipe here. Beat him though, and we get the information that the real director is tied up in the Underground Mall's warehouse, which he gives us the key for. When we step inside, Silver shows up again, eager to ruin Team Rocket's plans himself, but not before an attempt at revenge. His team is starting to show its age here. His Golbat is a joke, and his Haunter and Magnemite aren't much better. The Sneasel he stole is a very odd Pokemon. It specializes in physical attacks, yet it's a Dark Ice Pokemon, two types which are specially based. As a result of that and its meager defenses, it goes down in short order, leaving his starter... Seriously? Water gun this late? It's all too easy to take him down, and Silver starts to question if what Lance told him was right, leaving Team Rocket to us. This part has a simple door switch puzzle, 3, 2, 1, but if you do them out of order, you could get lost on how to solve it for a bit. After that and a few more fights with rocket grunts, we find the director, who gives us the card key and lets us progress up the radio tower. At the top are two executives, but their teams are relatively weak compared to what we've been fighting so far, and will go down easily. And just like that, Team Rocket disbands once more. As thanks, the director gives us the clear bell and tells us it probably has a connection to the Tin Tower. Once we get there, we're challenged by 3 sages, who tell us a part of the tale of the Tin and Brass Towers as we defeat each of them. Once we enter the Tin Tower itself, the legendary beasts are waiting for us. Raikou and Entei run off, but Suicune stays to challenge us. Like any legendary Pokemon, it's difficult to catch, but a powerful ally to have on your side. This fight is probably the first time you'll see the move Rain Dance and thus be introduced to weather. Rain Dance, Sunny Day, Sandstorm, and Hail affect the weather condition in battle and last for 5 turns. Rain Dance weakens fire moves and powers up water moves, Sunny Day does the opposite, Sandstorm deals minor damage to anything not rock, ground, or steel type, and Hail damages non-ice types. The moves are fairly uncommon in this generation, so I wouldn't be surprised if someone thought weather wasn't a thing until Gen 3. After you defeat or successfully capture Suicune, Yucine and the Sages show up to congratulate you on the battle. We can't ascend the tower quite yet, we'll need another key item for that. In the meantime, Raikou and Entei will be found at random throughout the region. They're the first example in the series of roaming Pokemon, a concept that's interesting on paper but irritating in practice. They'll appear at random in the wild and are very quick to run away, after which you have to try and find them again on a random route. Once you encounter one, you can track it with your Pokédex, but whenever you switch routes, it does too. Though they retain damage and status conditions between encounters, actually catching them is incredibly irritating. But like Suicune, they're incredibly strong and worthwhile additions to your team. Route 44 is forked to the north and south, with fewer battles to the north, but is still a short walk either way to the next major dungeon, Ice Path. True to its name, Ice Path is full of ice tile puzzles and ice-type Pokemon, including Delibird, Swinub, Jinx, and Sneasel. You might overlook the optional puzzle right here, but the item you're rewarded with is the HM for Waterfall, which is necessary for progression later. Putting it here is a somewhat curious choice since I haven't found any NPCs that allude to it being here either. I would imagine that most players would end up picking it up since it's a very short ice puzzle that only gives you a few movement options, but it's possible to miss nonetheless. In the next room we have another boulder puzzle. This time you need to push boulders into holes in the ground to make obstacles in the floor below to get to the ladder in the middle to move on. Initially I thought putting every boulder into the respective pits would lead to opportunities to collect items, but it turns out the only necessary ones are right by the start. Interesting way to throw you off. A few more ice puzzles later and we're in Blackthorn City, the last major city in the game and the one with the least to offer. It's got the gym, the Dragon's Den, which we can't enter yet, and the Move Deleter, who lets you delete any move from a Pokemon's moveset, including HMs. The next gym focuses on Dragon types. Dragon types are only weak to Ice and Dragon, so if you picked up an Ice type before, this is a great opportunity to test it out. The puzzle here is similar to the one in Ice Path. Push boulders into pits to create bridges down below, and soon enough you'll reach Claire, and that Ice type alone isn't likely to save you here. Claire uses 3 Dragonair, each of which know Thunder Wave, and they will try to paralyze you every chance they get. If you're trying to use a Dragon type against them, they'll retaliate with Dragon Breath, and each has a coverage move to potentially ruin your day after you're paralyzed and unable to move. All of this is in an attempt to soften you up for her ace, Kingdra, a water dragon type that loses the weaknesses of the water type and the ice type weakness of the dragon type. Unless you have a dragon of your own, you can't deal super effective damage to her, and even if you do, Kingdra also has Dragon Breath to deal with yours. Claire is the toughest challenge yet, and when you beat her, she refuses to accept defeat, tasking you with traversing Dragon's Den to meet the Master within. Dragon's Den has the worst music in the series, full stop. The underlying melody is there, but it's absolutely grating on the Game Boy sound trip, and I wouldn't blame you for turning the video down a bit here. Dragon's Den is tiny, with a handful of optional trainer battles and a few optional items, and the only mandatory use of Whirlpool before we reach the house at the center, where the Master gives us a short quiz with very obvious right and wrong answers. Basically, don't be silver and you'll get rewarded. Claire comes in, presuming you failed, only to discover that you passed with flying colors, and has no choice but to give you the Rising Badge, letting us advance to the Pokemon League. She tells us to go east from New Barktown, but before we do that, let's do a bit of cleanup and go over a few things that have opened up to us. If you return to the Master of Dragon's Den with a space open in your party, he'll give you a Dratini. If you answered correctly before, the Dratini will be a special one with extreme speed, a powerful move that functions like Quick Attack in that it will always move first. You can do this one when you get Strength, but Slowpoke Well has some goodies hidden behind a Strength boulder. South of Blackthorn is Route 45, which is home to a few unique wild Pokemon and a few trainer battles meant to prepare you for Claire, along with the other entrance to Dark Cave, which has as Wobbuffet, a unique Pokemon that can't attack, only counterattack. It's difficult to use, to say the least. There's also a few items, including TM13. TM13? The one we got earlier from that side quest? Well, that tears it. That was a huge waste of time. There's also the coolest guy in the universe wearing sunglasses in the dark. We can also climb that waterfall in Mount Motoring, travel deeper inside, claiming more items and fighting the Karate King, the dojo master from Saffron City's fighting dojo. His Pokemon are on par with ours, but since he only has 2, he goes down quickly, and as a reward for beating him gives us Tyrogue, the baby form of Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, and the new Hitmontop. Enough dilly-dallying, it's time to head back to New Barktown, where you can pick up the Master Ball from Professor Elm. If you're hunting the legendary beast, there's no better target to use it on. The path east of New Barktown leads us to Tojo Falls, where this guy tells us we've taken our first step into Kanto, the same Kanto from the original game. From here, it's a relatively straight shot to the Pokemon League gate with a handful of trainers in between. This brings me to one of the biggest problems with Generation 2, the level curve. My Pokemon are a bit higher level than the trainers in the area, but it's only as a result of exploring everywhere and battling every trainer I can. There's no good source of experience even at this point in the game, and unless you've been doing what I've been doing and regularly backtracking or focusing on only 1 or 2 Pokemon, it's difficult to raise a full team. Generation 1 did a much better job at handling its level curve, and every generation going forward does a better job at this as well. We eventually reach the Pokemon League gate, where the guard checks that we have every badge before letting us progress onto Victory Road. An incredibly short and disappointing Victory Road with a handful of items, but no puzzles and no trainers whatsoever. That is, except for Silver, who confronts you at the end of Victory Road. Silver is fairly tough based on levels alone. His movesets generally don't inspire the same confidence. Soon enough, he'll be taken down and we're off to fight the Elite Four. The first member this time around is Will, who specializes in psychic types. His only duplicates are Xatu, with the rest of his team being pretty well rounded, but for whatever reason his other Pokemon are all from Kanto, where they could have probably substituted Espeon, Wobbuffet, Girafarig, or Slowking. It is fairly diverse, but shouldn't be a big problem overall. Next up is Koga, promoted from Gym Leader to Elite Four. His team is pretty tough. Ariados is the weakest link by far, but if you think you can sweep through him with a Psychic type, Forretress's Steel type will show you otherwise and lay spikes on the field to damage your Pokemon when they switch in. After Forretress goes down, his only real threats left are Muck, which knows Minimize and becomes difficult to hit, and Crobat, which is fast, hits fairly hard, and knows Double Team to make itself hard to hit. A good hit from a Psychic type will take them down though, and it's off to fight Bruno, the only remaining Elite Four member and one who has hardly changed a bit. He switched one of his Onix for a Hitmontop, and all of his Hitmons are packing elemental attacks to throw you off guard, but Bruno really isn't much harder than he was in Gen 1. Karen is the last Elite Four member and worthy of the 4th spot in the lineup. She specializes in Dark types, but only has 3 of them on her team. Of those, Murkrow isn't much of a threat, but the Umbreon she leads with can take hits and deal out status conditions, and her Houndoom is a force to be reckoned with. The coverage from Gengar and Vileplume turns out to be pretty beneficial though, as between all of that and the level difference which has no doubt started to creep up on you, you'll probably find yourself struggling here. You might remember that I challenged the Elite Four in Red with my party being in the mid to late 40s, while the Elite Four's parties were in the mid to late 50s and early 60s by the end. If the level difference here is even lower, why is this harder? The first reason is enemy movesets being better, but the main reason has to do with stat experience, something I mentioned in the last video that determines stat growth. Every Pokemon you battle gives you more of it, making your overall stats increase, and by this time you are simply not likely to have earned as much of it as in the last game, and the difference matters. Unless you've been using what I affectionately refer to as little kid strats and been using only 1, maybe 2 Pokemon, your party overall will be weaker than they would have been in Red and Blue. This will all come to a head once you reach Lance. His party is boring but practical, and it's more appropriate to call him a flying type trainer than a dragon type trainer. He still uses Gyarados and Aerodactyl, but has added a Charizard to the mix and is now using 3 Dragonites. Between his overall type covers and bulk, I hope he brought a tough electric type to deal with half of his team and a strong ice or dragon type to keep the Dragonites at bay, or you'll find yourself losing very quickly. Defeat the Dragonite though, and that's it. We're now the champion and beat the game. There's still post-game to cover though, and quite a bit more of it than last time around. Right after starting up again, Professor Elm calls us with another gift, which is the SS ticket. We can head to the port in Olivine City to ride the SS Aqua. Like the SS Anne of the first game, it's full of trainers, but is a much smaller ship and all the trainers on board are strangely low-leveled for this point in the game. After reuniting this man with his granddaughter, we arrive at Vermilion City and almost the entire region of Kanto is opened up to us at this point. It's laid out exactly like it was in the original game, and our new objective is to collect all of Kanto's gym badges again. Unfortunately, the entire region is truncated a bit, with most routes being shortened, dungeons being trimmed or cut entirely, and many elements being changed or removed. Pokemon Tower, in a move that seems incredibly insensitive, was converted into this region's radio tower. The power plant is up and running for the new magnet train that connects Saffron to Goldenrod, but is out of commission in the biggest mandatory story quests in the post-game, where you have to catch the last Rocket Grunt who didn't get the memo about Team Rocket's dissolution, make him bye-bye a go-go, and retrieve the machine part in order to get the expansion card for your radio, which lets you use the Pokéflute to wake up Snorlax and explore the northwest of Kanto. The Safari Zone and Pewter Museum are gone as well, and Cinnabar got destroyed by a volcanic eruption. The trainers in the region are all under-leveled, but the gym leaders are all more or less on your level and have fairly balanced teams, considering they're all monotype. That is, except for Blue. Yeah, that Blue, your rival from last time. He's gone through some character development since last time, becoming slightly more humble but retaining his cocky persona. And it's well deserved, since he's rocking the same team that brought him to the top in Gen 1, albeit a bit lower leveled. This is likely to be the second most difficult fight in the game since his team is so balanced and at a high level. After you defeat him and have collected all 8 badges in Kanto, you're allowed to access Mount Silver, the final optional challenge of the game. Before that, this random old man in Peter City gives us the Silver Wing, which will let us progress in the Whirl Islands. Speaking of Silver, he shows up at Mount Moon with a little character development of his own. In future rematches, he'll have a Crobat. and right now he evolved his Haunter and Kadabra. He opened up to other people and accepted help, and soon he'll have treated his Golbat so well it evolves. It's a great example of using game mechanics to show character growth. With the Silver Wing in hand though, it's off to Johto, but first we're going to stop by the Tin Tower again. If you caught Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, you'll be given the Rainbow Ring and can ascend Tin Tower, which has several ledge puzzles and many items to collect as you climb to the top. At the peak is Ho-Oh, Gold's cover legendary and a more powerful fire-flying type than Moltres was. Like Mewtwo in the last game, it has Recover, but unlike Mewtwo, it can properly run out of uses for it. Ho-Oh will be tough to catch, but it's doable. More doable than Mewtwo was back then. The same goes for Lugia, who is found in the depths of the Whirl Islands, which is maze-like in design, with it being up to you to figure out which entrance to go in to get further in, and which entrance will get you rare items. Lugia's battle will be much the same as Ho-Oh's, except instead of fire moves, Lugia uses Hydro Pump instead. Somewhat curious since Lugia is Psychic Flying. With enough effort, or with the Master Ball, you'll add Lugia to your team. The average player might want to add at least one to their team for the final challenge in the game as we ascend Mount Silver. Surprisingly, Mount Silver isn't much more than a linear trek. At most, there's 2 branching paths that immediately lead to a dead end with an item inside. You can also find Larvitar and Misdreavus here, but we're right at the end now. It's not likely that very many players will want to add one to their team this late. At the peak of the mountain is the final challenge. It's none other than Red, the player character from Generation 1, and he means business. His Pokemon are still some of the strongest in the franchise, being in the upper 70s and early 80s, and he has excellent type coverage throughout his entire team. Since your team is likely going to be in the 50s, you're in for a challenge trying to take them down. Even your super effective attacks won't be able to knock his Pokemon out in one shot. And one wrong move, one unlucky crit, one small damage range away from a knockout, and you'll probably find yourself getting knocked out again and again. Be it through strategy or stubborn perseverance, you'll eventually succeed and the credits roll once again. Many players think of Kanto as merely the second half of the game, and Red is the true end point. No matter how you classify it though, there's a significant amount of content to do after beating the Elite Four this time around that will keep you busy long after defeating Lance for the first time. Once you've finished all of that, you still have the Battle Tower, now with high-level formats that will challenge you as long as you want. So, in the end, what are my overall thoughts on Crystal and Generation 2 as a whole? They're significantly better games than Red and Blue in many important ways. Although the routes in the game are shorter, they're no less content-packed with loads of secrets for dedicated players to discover around every nook and cranny. They're better balanced, have more overall content, are much more challenging, introduce an incredible number of features still in the franchise today, and are overall a fantastic step up from Red, Blue, and Yellow. There's some missteps for sure. The level curve is terrible, most of the new Pokemon are locked behind the game's second half, and as a result Pokemon variety suffers slightly, but on the whole, they're still fantastic games and ones I can certainly come back to. If I were to replay a Johto game again though, it would definitely be through the remakes Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but that's something to cover for another time. The next game we'll be looking at is much more divisive, but I'm looking forward to replaying it again. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you could leave a like and or comment down below. And if you want to see more of these long-form analysis videos in the future, please consider subscribing. Until next time, I'm Forma, and those are my thoughts.